I would say it only adds up. It becomes slightly more, you can say, of a higher responsibility when you are actually the teacher of a top class institution. And I would say, yes, we are sitting here in SPA. We are not exactly the top institution of this country, but we are very close to there, and we are fighting to become the top institution. When we are there, then there is some kind of an added responsibility about what we say, what we talk, because that is going to be transmitted, and that is going to be sometimes even taken as the gospel truth. So in the way we say things, we have to be absolutely sure about what we are saying. We have to keep our audience in mind all the time. And in today's world, when we are talking, where the broadcasting is so simple, sometimes you're talking to a particular audience. You have to keep in mind that there might be a time when the audience may be completely different, and the context may not even be known. Then how your words are taken, that's an important thing. So here, sitting in SPA, one of the things that has brought SPA to this place, let's first look at why it's even now at this point. Of course, there is the legacy, the history, the fact that it was one of the earliest ones. There have been earlier ones than SPA too. Okay? And in a way, you could say that SPA now has leapfrogged, jumped over them to reach this point. So that is primarily because of a certain ethos that we had in the school, and that ethos was, when I say was, I'm using that word very consciously, was about architecture in the real world. It was about architecture of practice, because that is what the school had been made for. The school had been made because architects were required, and architects were required particularly in this part of the country, the north of the country, because a lot of buildings had to be built. So it was something which was of great demand. To be an architect who could design and get buildings built, to be that was of great demand. And so the nature of our education here, we can say pedagogy or whatever, was always biased towards the idea that we will create a person who will go out there and who will design a building and who will be then able to get it built. So all the skills required to do that were given primacy. And sure enough, what happened was that yes, products of the school, they went out and they designed and they built, and there are a number of buildings all over the place who have got architects who's from the SPA New Delhi, and that is how we earned our name. What happened in this process was that because our training was essentially imported, the way we learned our architecture, the kind of architecture we learned to do, and therefore the kind of architecture which we went out and practiced was essentially imported. So on the one hand, you could say it was imported because the school progressed in a British legacy. So independence happened, the school was unmindful of that, and whatever was the British legacy, what was the British legacy in the PWD, which was the major construction agency, and the students, the products of this institute were building a lot for the government. So that method of design and that method of building and construction, it went on and on and on with not much thought to whether it is what should be done now in this country, given the circumstances, given the needs. So while the idea that the product of this college was able to produce competently something the critical aspect of it somewhere got missing. The questioning of whether this is right or wrong, the questioning of whether this is something which should continue to happen, the question that some changes need to be done so that going in the future we will become, we will stay relevant, we'll keep on doing things which are good. That did not arise for the longest time. Simply speaking, the idea that, a school which is at such a level and aspiring to go even higher has to be the generator of new ideas. The big thoughts for the future, they have to be born here. Okay? Somehow we have been sliding into the idea that, oh, that is the great thing happening there. Let's also start teaching this to our students. So we have become followers rather than leaders or initiators of, cutting edge thought. And that is problematic. So if on the one hand we are finding that, the rest of the, you can say, architectural college world is talking about the fact that, oh well, there are so many colleges, and oh well, there are so many seats, and oh well, there are so many seats going vacant, and oh well, so many colleges are not viable, and then there are problems of that there are so many graduates, and there are so many graduates without jobs. Okay, all of those thoughts are going on the one hand. On the other hand, where is this school in a position that we can say that we are going to create these new jobs, because we are going to create these new circumstances in which architects of our kind are going to be required. So a big thrust is required to get out from this stasis, this static position of no forward movement. We have to find the avenues where we can make that difference. And in making that difference, of course, that's a whole different debate altogether, where we should be heading. But we, at this point, should be intrepid. We should not be fearful. We should not be thinking, oh, is there market demand for this? Is the student going to actually come and join here or not? The fact is, the students are coming here to join because they don't know and they want to learn great things. And at the end of it, are we giving them great things or not? So first of all, we have to create those great things where we are having the shortage. And of course, there are very reasons why that shortage has been there. You can say infrastructure and lack of faculty, all those things are there. By and by, they're going to get sorted. But the more important thing is to, how do I say it, to rededicate, to re-missionize ourselves. Find for ourselves a new purpose for being there. The other 450 schools of this country, they are now they're capable of producing that competent architect who can go out there, design and execute a building. And they are doing it in good numbers. Okay? But they are not doing it of great quality. Because the school towards which they were looking to lead the path towards quality is not leading towards the path of quality. So while it's all right to say that we have now a bigger intake, there are many more people who are, you can say, being immersed in the SPA doctrine, it's also very important to now kick up the SPA doctrine, move it up from the fact that you are competent to do 500 acres of urban design. You've done a project, great things have come out of it. Okay, but it's important to now raise the bar to question, is this the right way to do it? Should we go ahead and do it? Do we need such projects? the debate has to be raised. Should be not just about that this is a project and you have to design it. It has to be of much, much more than that. Only then can we expect that down the line we will have the effect to improve the output from other colleges. And you can say you are being very supercilious. You're just assuming that you are the leader and what you say other people. I'm saying yes. I'm saying that it is for us to be guiding the movement that we require for architecture in the country. That's not to say that nobody else can. That's not to say that other people should not also be trying to do the same thing. There are other colleges who are in, I would say some are even in much better situation than us to do that. Unfortunately, even they are not doing it. So if you look at the top ranked colleges, I can't see how the top 2 ranks above us, we are number 3 and so on. I think we are fluctuating between 2, 3 and 4 over the last 4 years. The top ranked colleges who are above us, even they are not showing any direction. And truth be told, they were never the direction giving colleges. The direction giving colleges was CEPT and SPA. Let's be very frank about it. Okay? So, quite simply, if CEPT was leading in the thought business, if CEPT was doing in the research business, if CEPT was about, expanding the knowledge bank, the ecosystem in which an architect could design, and SPA was much more about actually doing it. In today's world, this actually doing it is, I would say, in danger of becoming completely irrelevant. Because the actual doing it has now been codified and engineered to such an extent that you can almost say that even a machine can do it. Okay, so the idea that the entire BIM can be modeled and then a machine can be in a CAD/CAM mode, can actually just make the house for you. That big USP which this institution had is no longer its USP. So that new USP has to be found. And I am so hopeful that we have got now a crop of young people, and I would really urge them to think of their life goal as not about just teaching students on the day-to-day basis, which is important, no doubt, but is of actually finding interests which are a little hatke, which are a little different from what is set out in the syllabus and what is in the curriculum. So that the new curriculum and the new syllabus, which should happen now, we already had this one working for, I think, this is 7 or 8 years old, can actually show the light. And that requires finding time to be engaged with, to be interested in things which are not mundane about everyday life. To be engaged with things which are somewhere in the dream world, you can say. They are futuristic. I will just give an example of what happened in my own family. It is kind of de rigueur that when you have 2 parents, both architects, then the bacha has to do with architecture. Okay, this is, I would say 90% it is true. And in my family, my children were very clear that architecture is something which they don't want to do. So you could say, I mean, there could be many reasons. They might be looking at, maybe your practice is not such a hotshot practice. You're not top of the pops, and therefore they don't want to come and join your practice. That's not good. But my son gave me the very simple answer. He said that you say that your profession of architecture is about creativity, and that your profession of architecture is about imagination, and it's about dreaming big things and then putting them down on the ground. I said, yes. So he says, I also want to do the same thing. So I asked him, why aren't you doing architecture? So he says that as a profession, as a discipline, you have no dreams. So I asked him to explain. So he says, if I am into something, if I am into physics, then there are some frontiers which we have not crossed. There's something happening somewhere which people are trying to find out, people are trying to discover, people are trying to invent, people are trying to research upon, which is not about here and now, which they're saying that in the next 5 years, we hope to learn about this. And when we learn about this, then we think that it can be useful in so many different places. In architecture, what is the big dream? And especially in architecture in India, what is the big dream? Where does architecture of India want to be in the next 10 years? Is there something you're thinking that in the next 10 years, हम ये कर देंगे India में? Yeah, in the next 10 years, this is what we are trying to do so that this big problem is solved. And there are people all over who are working towards it. It's your mission. What is your mission? And I couldn't give him an answer. So yes, who's the culprit? हम ही तो हैं. हम ही तो नहीं किया काम. We are the ones who didn't do that work. Because we were in a way comfortable and satisfied and happy with that business of merely the competence to put up buildings. Okay, that is not enough for an institution like SPA. We have to be doing more. So that competence part is okay. It's a given. If you're not turning out competent architects, then we should close down. Okay, but beyond that competence, what we are doing. So I would say in terms of the big things that we need to do is we need to put our heads together to figure out what this world needs. In that, what does this country need? At least for one of the parts of the country to figure out a goal for architecture, an objective for architecture, a target, a mission. All the time we are talking about this is wrong with our architecture, this is wrong with our architecture, this is resource intensive, it's harming the earth, okay, generating so much of whatever you call it, carbon, and what have we done to change that? What are we even thinking of as a way out of this? All the effort, it's not to say that we are entirely unmindful, it's not to say that we are blissfully ignorant. We know we're not ignorant, we know the problems where they lie, but why are we waiting for somebody else to find the solutions? It is our job, we have to find the solutions. So many architects, I would say not enough in their practices, are doing different things, sure enough. But where is the research happening in trying to figure out all of these as a whole to see which one requires a much more intensive engagement and therefore the attention of the government. We are just happy to say, oh, we are so important because we have managed the government to look at housing as a big factor. Housing for all is a national mission, and there are so many things we are doing, trying to make this possible. Okay, but where are we trying to actually give direction to the policy makers that out of all this is where we should be investing money, so that not now, but 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, we will have in our hands something which is so different from what we have today, from anything that we have today, which is going to be the game changer. Even today, when we are talking about innovative technologies and innovative ways of doing things, we are talking about the same things which we were talking 25 years ago. Why? Okay, so that is where I think as an institution we should be headed, particularly in the area of architecture, so that the ecosystem in which people come and learn and teach and work and research in this institution gets a real kick. I'm saying that such an institution as ours should actually have almost like a dedicated research cadre. People who are primarily doing research and incidentally teaching. In the teacher's role that we have in the institution, for long it has been that you are teaching and perchance you are practicing. Was something which happened quite a few years down the line. In the initial years, it really was you are practicing and perchance you are teaching. And you can say I was one of those who was practicing and perchance I was teaching. And only you can say after half my architectural career was over, that's when I actually joined teaching permanently in the school. So the idea that you were to begin with, you were a practitioner and therefore you could teach architecture is like a, you can say, traditional model. That's how the Freemasons trained their young to build the buildings in Europe. That's how the Sthapatis trained in India. That you worked as an apprentice to a practitioner and learned the art or the craft or the science or whatever it was. But what did you learn? You learned to make the same thing, perhaps better, because you are young, you are energetic, you are given to some exploration, but you learned it with the same principles, the same methods, the same tools. The idea of learning as being something which is not quite just practice, but an exploration of something new is really thanks to what happened in Europe 100 years ago. The big wars and the destruction and the large scale need for rebuilding, and the idea that rebuilding in the same method that it had been done earlier would be very time consuming, would be very expensive. Perhaps a lot of it is not even relevant now. that all started the thought that we can rethink this whole thing. Okay, and if we think from the first principles about what do we really need, what is the tools at our disposal with which we can do it, is what gave birth to modern architecture. And that just went around the world, and everybody just accepted that this is the modern way, and we became a college or an institution which was propagating that modern way. And in this propagation, we commandeered people who were practicing, who had a little bit of, you can say, intensity in trying to break the barriers, trying to look for new frontiers. And they would come and teach. And being permanent teachers and permanent practitioners was kind of fair. That you were a teacher at SPA and you also had a practice, because it was with practice that you were able to teach better. This was an understood principle. That practice of architecture is taking place in a certain way in which the responsibility of this particular person called the architect, who's responsible for the project, who's actually by title and by license the architect, it meant that, doing projects by these teachers as individuals was a lot more viable. It was a lot more possible to do, because that's how you would get projects. The institution wouldn't get projects to do, and even now it doesn't. It's very hard for the institution to get projects to do, and they are certainly not enough for all the teachers of this institution, and I'm talking about architecture teachers of this institution, to be engaged in practice. So yes, in the Department of Architecture there are lots of projects going on, but in those projects our teachers cannot be engaged. They're not enough. We need many, many, many more. So on the one hand is the question that without practice, teaching is incomplete. Without practice, learning of the students is incomplete. The question that practice has to be encouraged has been there for the long time, but how that practice of architecture can be encouraged for teachers, that system has not been created. So we have been, you can say, not vocal enough, not proactive in building up that system, where the idea that, for the practice of architecture, it's important that the individual be allowed to practice. How we can make that something which is beneficial for the institution, that system has not been created. On the one hand, the fact that if the individual practices, it can be much, much richer, it can be much, much more beneficial, it can be much, much more topical and relevant for the teaching that person does in the school. All of that is agreed and acceptable. But how do you make that as something from which the school will benefit? And right now the school is only thinking of two benefits. One is that it must have a better income, because we need looking for money come from consultancy, that's one. And the other is that the school notches points of reputation. Alright. So for that, this system needs to be revisited, it needs to be looked at. That system which was there before was dismantled because it was thought to be dishonest. It was thought that architects were making a lot more money from their practice, not devoting enough time to the institution, and therefore we need to do only institutional practice. And institutional practice doesn't get you the gamut of architectural projects which are lying around. Taj Group of Hotels is not going to give SPA a project to design one of their hotels. Let's be very clear. Apollo Hospitals is not going to give you a project. Narayan Hridayalaya is not going to give you a project. Okay, so architectural project. Airport authority is not going to give you an architectural project. Okay, so if we are not going to get 90% of the projects which are out there, how can we expect that only with those projects which come our way, we can have all our faculty engaged in practice enough to enrich themselves and transfer the knowledge to their students? And I would say great things are afoot. So in 2020, not in 2020, but yeah, in the beginning of 2021, the new education policy 2020 has come in, and it has shaken up everything, because that's the kind of disruption which is proposed there. And in that, the idea of how teachers and learners will conduct themselves has been totally rewritten. So here, in just the last 15 days, a few things have happened, and we must be mindful of that. Okay, and those things which have happened, which are now that the National Education Policy 2020 is now being rolled out, seriously being rolled out. Okay, so one of the things which has happened is that the UGC has accepted that practice in any field is an important way of disseminating knowledge. And they have said that now we can have a cadre of teachers in practice. So they are saying that yes, you can have professors, and then you can have professors of practice, and also you said professors of practice. Okay, this acknowledgement is not out of the, it's just not suddenly popped up. It is a few years back, the Ministry of Education and the secretary, or the ex-secretary, I'm not very certain at this time, had actually proposed that just having the PhD and teaching all your students through people who have the PhD is not going to give you the results you want. You have to have people who can listen to the reality which is happening out there, which can only happen with people who can show you what they have done, been there, done that, and now you listen to me because I have seen how it works. So you need this induction. So this had been bubbling somewhere at the bottom. It had been purposely suppressed because of vested interest from the academia. I mean, the people who are professors, who've not done a dhela of practice in their lives, don't want this to happen. That suddenly now you will have a colleague who will have done practice only and will now come and tell the students what really happens in practice, and God knows how many mistakes of ours they will discover. Okay, so it had been suppressed. Now it has come out in the open. It has been accepted. It is now going to happen in all colleges, in all universities, and in all disciplines. So about time we had in architecture also a cadre of teachers in practice. Okay. The same time, I am saying that we need to have a cadre of teachers in research. And I'm saying that purely from the point of view that you cannot expect Kapil Devs everywhere. All-rounder is a rare breed. So we always look at Leonardo da Vinci. What a wonderful man he was. Artist bhi tha, scientist bhi tha, engineer bhi tha, military man bhi tha. I don't know what all he did. Okay, but that is a rarity. Everybody cannot be doing all these things. So let the people who can do a particular thing, give them the space, find for them the objectives in life so that they can fully engage, fully immerse, profitably, fruitfully in that activity which in the bigger picture is nationally important. for that, you must first have a checklist of what is nationally important. And that means setting up a much bigger coordinated effort of where in architecture is research required to achieve what with a certain timeline. And let people who are interested in this come forward, become a network, and start doing their work. So my message at this time, particularly for SPA, is that let us not wait for someone else to tell us that this is what we need to do. Let us proactively figure this out and present to the policy makers that this is what we think we are going to be doing in future, why it is necessary, why it is important, and why we have to be the ones who are taking the lead. That's all at this time.
This is amazing. Thank you so much, sir.